Greetings, Acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the Archives. Anakin's first descent into the dark side began with the loss of his mother, and the subsequent genocide he carried out on the Tusken tribe responsible. This was one of the most defining moments in Anakin's life, one that truly awakened the part of him, which was Vader, the dragon inside. From this moment forward, Anakin would always live in fear of losing those that he loved, causing him to make selfish decisions on behalf of others. This also left him vulnerable to manipulation by Sidious in his nightmares. But stepping outside of Anakin's internal struggle for a moment, we can't pretend that what he did wasn't completely against the Jedi way, and wouldn't have certainly gotten him expelled from the Jedi Order. Anakin of course knew this, and wisely kept the secret close to himself, not even telling his master, Obi-Wan. But this leaves the question, other than Padme, who did Anakin actually confide in? Who else simply knew? And what were their reactions to this atrocious act? Well, join us today as we open a holocron and talk about everyone who knew about the slaughter of the Sand People. The two people who are blatantly told about this event were of course Padme and Palpatine. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine references Anakin telling him about his mother and the Sand People as a way to soothe his feelings about taking revenge on Dooku. This all makes sense, as Padme and Palpatine were the only two people that Anakin ever trusted with his true emotions. He sometimes talked with Obi-Wan, but usually kept his master at a brother's arm's length. Obi-Wan was staunchly adherent to the Jedi Code, and Anakin knew that if he tried to confide in his master, Obi-Wan's conscience wouldn't allow him to keep something like this from the Council. He would certainly turn Anakin in, and he would be expelled from the Jedi. But of course, Anakin couldn't keep this secret in for too long, and he had told Padme, but her shock at the situation only allowed her to render Anakin comfort, but no guidance. We learn in the canon novel Brotherhood that Anakin desperately wanted some guidance on the matter from an older person who would understand him and his emotions. He didn't like bringing this event up to his wife for fear of how she would feel about him, knowing how she felt about excessive violence in the first place. 2 months after the events of Geonosis, Anakin just finished with his knighting ceremony when Palpatine decided to pull him aside in his office and have a conversation. It's here where we see how the Chancellor has been manipulating Anakin his entire life by being a kind, listening ear and a fatherly influence in Anakin's life. When he asked the young Skywalker how he's doing, it is not a pleasantry like it is with others. It is a genuine question of concern. Because of this, Anakin feels like he can trust the Chancellor with all of his feelings, even noting that unlike the others, Palpatine understood. And of course, by understanding, we know that Palpatine mostly encourages Anakin to give in to his feelings and keep them strong, planting the seeds of disobedience to the Jedi Code. But anyway, learning from the passage where Anakin divulges the truth, he just tells the Chancellor that his mother was murdered, leaving out the details, to which Palpatine of course expresses sincere condolences, before Anakin then said this: "I killed them, the Sand People." Unlike that moment in the Lars homestead, Anakin wasn't expelling grief through searing words and falling tears. This came out calm, tempered, equal parts admission and confirmation. "They took her life, and I took theirs." Palpatine set his calf mug down with a click, then reached over, the warmth of his palm resting over Anakin's mechanical one. "They killed your mother. Your mother," Palpatine said, his weathered voice slow and deliberate. "Of course you wanted revenge. How could anyone not when facing such an injustice? It seems like simple mathematics to me." No, this was not an admission. This was a validation. And Anakin knew. He knew that the Chancellor would give it, because he always understood in the ways that the Jedi could not. Palpatine would then further manipulate the situation, turning Anakin against the Jedi. As if reading his mind, Palpatine begins talking to Anakin about how Jedi like Windu didn't actually care for people, not in the way that Anakin did. Palpatine goes on to tell Anakin how special he is because he allows himself to feel, to care, and to love. He goes on to say that it makes him stronger and a better person, further stoking Anakin's ego and turning feelings against the Jedi. Later on, we would actually learn that Palpatine was surprised by this information that Anakin openly gave him. He never imagined that Anakin was this far along in his anger and path to the dark side as only a mere Jedi Knight. This is why Palpatine begins to spend a lot of time around the young boy. He knew it was time to move in, and the Clone Wars was the perfect time to start, especially the advanced stages of the grooming. While into the Clone Wars, Anakin would divulge his secret to another Jedi though, and the most unlikely one at that, all in the moment of pure rage and fury. After believing that Obi-Wan had died in the Battle of Jabim, Anakin was in a rough place mentally and working with none other than Asherad Het, the only Tusken Jedi. The two of them were going on a mission of their own, and Anakin was struggling to work with Asherad because of his prejudice. The entire time he was extra insolent to the Jedi Master, constantly making side comments, constantly hitting the Master with jabs on his Tusken heritage. Asherad would tolerate this, but decided to just try to bond with Anakin over their shared history of growing up on Tatooine. But later, when they were fighting a group of enemies, Anakin decided to take out his anger by visualizing the enemies as a group of Tuskens. Anakin began to cut them down viciously until his moment of fury suddenly turned on the Jedi Master. Anakin attacked Asherad while shouting about screaming how he killed every last Tusken savage, old, young, men, and women, how he didn't regret it at all, but enjoyed every moment. Meanwhile, Asherad tried to defend himself without hurting Anakin, as he was far more powerful than the young Skywalker at this point in time, and simply by using his Jedi temperance to see the confrontation out, he was able to outlast Anakin. He tries to reason with the boy, until Anakin slashed his Garferti stick in half, forcing Asherad to end the bout with a swift kick to Anakin's jaw. Once he was out of his rage, Asherad reprimanded him, but not about his prejudice against the Sand People. In fact, Het said that as a Tusken, he understood the desire for vengeance more than others. This was of course a trait of the Tusken culture, but he then said that as a Jedi, he couldn't allow the desire for vengeance to flourish, in himself or in anyone else. He pointed out that it was clear that Anakin hadn't told his master about this event, nor any other Jedi, since it was still seething within him. This is when Asherad decided to tell Anakin his own story, how he had to learn to temper his own desire for vengeance against the murderer of his father, training with Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi and the Dark Woman Anya Kuro. As Anakin calmed himself, Asherad continued to be understanding to his plight. He made him confront his actions and his feelings against the Tuskens, and Master Het recognized that they were never going to be able to work together as long as he continued to be a Tusken Raider. And so, for the first time in his life, Asherad Het removed his Tusken mask, allowing Anakin to be the first person who ever saw his face. This including Asherad's own father, who never saw his face as it was covered from birth. Anakin, seeing that Asherad was a human underneath, apologized and worked with him to get out of the situation. Finally, Asherad, having mercy on the boy, did not tell the Jedi Council of his crimes against the Tuskens. This concludes the list of people that Anakin actually told from his own mouth about the slaughter of the Sand People. Everyone else would find out by other means. Qui-Gon's ghost, for example, was actually present with Anakin when he was doing the deed, and in the novelization for Attack of the Clones, it details how Anakin heard the voice of Qui-Gon begging him to stop and to stay his hand. But in his moment of fury, in not having heard Qui-Gon's voice in a decade, he didn't recognize it and ignored it. A common misconception about Qui-Gon's spirit knowing about Anakin's dark deed is that Yoda knew as well, since he felt Skywalker's pain and Qui-Gon's pleading voice within the Force. But in actuality, Yoda did not know what Anakin had done, only his feelings while doing it. And as far as we currently know, Yoda never confronted Anakin about it either. Obi-Wan Kenobi, for a large portion of his life, was oblivious to the act as well, only finding out many years later after the purge on Tatooine. While meditation and communing with Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan would have it confirmed through the Force. He was deeply disturbed by this information, causing his feelings towards Anakin to change even more. This is told to us in the life and legend of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is the passage. Shmi Skywalker had not died alone. Ben did not have to guess who had slaughtered the Tuskens. Now you know, said Qui-Gon's disembodied voice. Ben was still so stunned that he didn't even slightly flinch when he heard Qui-Gon, whose voice sounded as if it had come from above and behind Ben's head. Ben said, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" "You weren't ready," Qui-Gon said. "You're still not ready." "Not ready?" Ben echoed. He swallowed hard before he continued. "Master, if you mean that I'm not ready to understand what happened here, then I believe you're mistaken. Anakin killed an entire tribe of Tuskens out of vengeance, and then kept it a secret from everyone. Apparently you were aware of this, and yet you still maintain that he is the chosen one. What more is there to know? Qui-Gon answered that Anakin did not keep this a secret from everyone. And why did Anakin keep this secret from you? This shocked Obi-Wan, and Ben was about to reply because he was afraid he'd be banished from the Jedi Order. But instead, Obi-Wan shook his head and said this: "It doesn't matter whom Anakin told. What matters is that he was a Jedi and that he became a butcher." Qui-Gon then said this: "You should not judge when you fail to understand." In this heartbreakingly complex conversation, Kenobi grieves over Anakin's actions, while Qui-Gon's spirit defends Anakin, not in a way of saying that Anakin was correct in what he did, but pointing out that Obi-Wan shouldn't levy judgment that he didn't understand, and never made an effort to try to. Qui-Gon in this moment was trying to get his apprentice to see that his Jedi dogma had blinded him, blinding him to the severity of what Anakin was feeling in that moment, and had hampered Obi-Wan from becoming the master that Anakin needed. All of the reactions to Anakin's slaughter of the camp were different, but similar, with the common emotion being that of complete shock, all for different reasons. Palpatine's shock was more of a pleasant surprise that Anakin had already taken these kinds of steps to the dark side. Obi-Wan was disturbed and disgusted by Anakin. Qui-Gon's shock came in the form of grief for Anakin and Shmi's death. And the only one who seemed to actually understand Anakin and come from a place of healing was, ironically, Asherad Het, the Tusken Jedi Master. He had mercy on Anakin for the killing of his people, not being sorry about it, and not ever being angry or attacking Anakin. After all of this, Asherad had compassion because he was a Tusken. He understood the ways of vengeance better than anyone, but because he was trained out of it by his father's dying wish and the help of Jedi Masters, he probably would have been able to work Anakin through this issue completely. Maybe, just maybe, if Asherad Het had trained Anakin, they each may have prevented one another's fall to the dark side and embrace of Sithhood. But that is a discussion for another day. But what do you think, my friends? Had you ever wondered if Anakin's first dark deed reached the ears of anyone else besides Padme and Palpatine? What are your thoughts on everyone being shocked except for Asherad Het? Let us know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comments down below. And as always, may the Force be with you.